We knew exactly who was in that boat, we knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. I watched that first strike line. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. But I moved on to my next meeting. I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
Margaret Donovan, a former JAG officer, joins us in our fifth seat. There's a lot of deflection going on there. Just his body language as he talks about this. And then he uses the term fog of war as if that absolves you from responsibility, does it?
No, listen, it is September 2nd. This is the opening strike on a highly controversial air campaign that has never really been done before by the American military. And you have the Secretary of Defense saying that he didn't stick around for the whole strike. He had a meeting to go to, and he couldn't see the entire thing through. You were the Secretary of Defense. You can push the meeting, and you can stay for the strike. Because lo and behold, conveniently, at the very moment that he walks out, apparently a war crime occurs. So everything that he just said there in those clips is fascinating. First of all, any, defense or other narrative that this boat was still operable is gone because Secretary Hegseth just said it was on fire. And you have the President of the United States saying something that you would expect the President of the United States to say, which is that he's relying on his Secretary of Defense for this information. Well, guess what? Pete Hegseth doesn't have that information for you because he walked out of the room. And now there's a 4-star general with a highly respectable career in the special operations community who's going to be left holding the bag.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like they really are throwing him under the bus. Let me just read what George Will, a conservative columnist, said about this whole thing. He says, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth seems to be a war criminal without a war, an interesting achievement. The killing of the survivors by this moral slum of administration should nauseate Americans. A nation incapable of shame is dangerous, not least to itself. I would have expected, despite there's all this back and forth about who ordered it, who didn't. Let's put all that aside. They're in that room. They're asked about it. We know there's a second strike. Why didn't either one of those men say, we're going to look into this? Something like that should never happen in an engagement by the United States military. Why?
Abby, I can't even understand any of this Venezuela thing. To me, it is absolutely cuckoo crazy. Look, Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez before him are corrupt, sadistic, cruel, thieves, authoritarian, anti-American son of a bitch. And what Donald Trump is doing is attempting regime change. I will be incredibly happy, elated, if Nicolas Maduro goes away. I don't care which way. But the things that Donald Trump is claiming regarding Venezuela, that they are flooding the U.S. with drugs, that simply is not true. The fentanyl that is killing all of these Americans is coming through Mexico. The people that, the preferred route for drug dealers is through the Pacific and then through Central America, including the country of Honduras, where he just pardoned the former president that did flood American streets with cocaine that killed thousands and thousands of Americans. And then, he's claiming that Venezuela opened up prisons and insane asylums and released all these people into the United States. That actually did happen. It happened in 1980 in Cuba, and we all saw it happen. I was in Miami when the Mariel boat lift happened. There is zero evidence that that has happened in Venezuela. What happens? He wants to do regime change. He wants his Panama with Noriega. He wants his Grenada moment like Ronald Reagan did. But he can't say that it's regime change. One, because it's highly unpopular with the American people. And because, two, it would require the authorization of Congress.
Well, and we're not even close operationally, right? We're not even on land yet. And we've already got a war crime, national embarrassment on our hands. We haven't even proceeded with the actual land operation.
And how much of the U.S. Navy arsenal is off the coast of Venezuela right now?
For some kilos of cocaine? Well, I mean, give me a break.
Batia, I raised this yesterday. I mean, I think one of the big question marks here is this a pretext for regime change? And if it is, what is our level of engagement going to be in that? And should they be transparent about it? I think those are really important questions for Americans who care. If they're on those battleships in the Caribbean, if they are living there are many Americans in the Caribbean who could be, in the area, as Trump has said, the airspace around Venezuela is closed. So don't we deserve answers on some of those things? Even on a basic level, don't we deserve answers about who these men were? If he knew exactly what they were and what they were doing, don't we deserve answers about that?
I definitely want to know if regime change is happening, and I will be very angry if it happens and I was not informed. So the answer to all those questions, I always want more information, but I feel like we're in the midst of another Russiagate hoax. There was a group of Democrats who said you can refuse illegal orders, and now they're out there in search of a war crime, and there absolutely isn't one. So what happened was the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel issued a classified legal opinion authorizing these U.S. military strikes. At that point, the Department of, I guess I have to call it war, issued the directive that we were going to start hitting them. At that point, Admiral Bradley gave the order for the first strike. Pete Hegseth watched it. The boat caught fire. Now, in order to establish that a war crime happened, we have to know that the boat was completely destroyed. The military action, which was authorized by the DOJ under Article 2 powers, which Trump has the legal right to issue, that boat was destroyed, was no longer a threat, and that there were two people clinging to it for life who were also no longer a threat. We do not know that yet.
You don't really.
And what happened
I tend to disagree. I mean, we do have a JAG lawyer who has a lot of experience with military strikes. I think it's a really
because if the boat was only disabled and not destroyed, it is still a legitimate military target.
Here's the main issue: is it legal when if there are survivors clinging to whatever? Is it legal to then strike them again? And maybe we don't know the full answer to that question, but that is the central issue here.
Can I just?
That's the central
question
issue.
is not actually that. The question is
The question is actually that.
The whole thing
No.
hangs on whether
No,
the boat
Batia.
is still a military
The
target
issue,
or not.
the issue when
Because
it
it was
comes
a military
to
target.
the
There were people
legality
on it when
of
they hit it
the
the first
strike,
time.
the issue when it comes to the legality of the second strike, not the
Yes.
first one.
It's not
The
whether
second
there are
strike.
people there.
It is
It's
what
whether it's
happens
still a legitimate
to
target.
no. It's what happens to survivors.
No, it's
And
not.
we don't
That's
know.
wrong.
I think I'm going to acknowledge that there are things about this that we don't know. That we don't know where they were, what was the state of the boat, all that stuff.Ure, we don't know who gave the order, but I do think that is the central question,
It's
Margaret,
not.
that needs
The
to be
question is not
answered.
the existence of the survivors. It's whether the boat is still a legitimate military target.
Margaret,
hold on a
Is that
second.
not
Margaret, I
accurate?
want Margaret to weigh in
That's
on
not
this.
true. Look,
Why?
because you cannot shoot survivors of a shipwreck that are clinging on for dear life in the
That's
middle
not.
of the ocean.
You're using the word shipwreck to hide the
No,
distinction.
I'm
that
just-
I have
I'll
point
use
behind
Secretary
it.
Hegseth's
The word
word.
shipwreck is in
boat
the regs.
Yes, but I'm saying the whole point here is it still a legitimate target or not? If they can get on that debris and call for the rest of the narco terrorists to show up and save them, it is still a legitimate military
So
target.
Okay, I'm going to
This
defer
doesn't-
to the expert here. Go
Look,
ahead,
factually,
Margaret.
this just doesn't pass the laugh test. You're talking about two people stranded in the middle of the ocean, and you think
Can
they're
you
going to call
please
for
say, is that
backup.
distinction between
With the
whether it
kill
is
strike order.
disabled or whether it
And
is
can we
destroyed
back
not
up a little bit? Because I just want to explain sort of how an airstrike is prosecuted, right? Because first you have a target in the first place.
Yes.
And the target could be an
But
individual,
you
the
think
target
that
could be a
was never
building.
a legitimate
The target could be a boat.
Say something.
And so this is why we need, and we talked about this the other night, we need a full investigation. What was the target? Because I thought the target was the drugs. Those are gone if the boat's on fire. Maybe the target is these
Target was the
so-called
boat.
terrorists.
The target was the boat, according to all the reporting.
So I think we should wait for an investigation to see what the target actually was. If the target was a boat, then we're in this place where, we are using military force to target boats. What? I mean, for something
you
that.
don't think that the initial military attack was
can I make one
legitimate?
more point? Because this entire
So tell me about the
hypothetical,
second one,
the
right?
entire hypothetical that you're posing hinges on whether or not they could call somebody to be rescued. But if they're in a scenario where they need to call somebody to be rescued, they are shipwrecked. That is the definition of shipwrecked, and they cannot be targeted. That term, as Abby pointed
I'm
out,
sorry, if the
is
radio is
specifically
still
used.
working on the boat, it is still a legitimate
Batia,
military
you cannot
target.
just concoct your own explanation
I'm
for
not
this.
concocting my own
I'm
explanation.
just
This
saying,
is the
here's
law.
no. I'm saying that literally the law says that attacking shipwrecked individuals in the context of war is not allowed. That is literally what they
Because
use
a
that.
shipwreck
the
is no
word-
longer a legitimate
word
target because it's
Shipwreck
no
is
longer a
in
threat.
is in the
We're
document.
agreeing.
So
I'm not
just saying,
You are agreeing with me.
you are suggesting that if there's any scenario in which maybe they could have called somebody on land,
Yeah.
they would have come by boat or helicopter or
Yeah.
whatever to help them, then that would have justified attacking them again. I am pretty sure, as Margaret is saying, and as virtually everybody is saying, that is not the case. I will agree with you on one thing. This requires investigation. We need more information. But the basics of
And the Republican
situation
the Republican
such that this
chairman
would
of
be
the
this would be
committee
the
of oversight.
Roger Wicker says he'll ask more
This is the question.
Right,
Okay,
but I want
we're
to go
gonna
back to
pause. We have more. Okay, we have more ahead, Brad. So hold that thought.
I'm not gonna say anything
Because
in the next
CNN
block.
did dig up old video of Pete Hegseth saying the troops won't follow illegal orders, which of course is exactly what Democrats warned in that infamous video. That's next.